Hello. I have a few observations to share with you. Recently, I finished playing through Arkham Asylum for the first time in a couple of years. I've replayed it several times in the many years since it's come out, and I thought I would share some of the little things I noticed while playing that I don't often see others talk about, things I think are interesting or intriguing. Now, I've seen a lot of videos going over this kind of stuff before, so I'm just going to try to avoid most of the obvious things, but I think a few things need to be said just to preface what I'm going to say later. Obviously, there are a lot of things to note about how there is consistently a portrayal of Arkham Asylum hiding its true nature beneath a shiny and respectable looking surface, at least as much as it can. That's really obvious, even on a simple playthrough, but there are a couple of elements that I don't think a lot of people point out. One of the things that really stood out to me playing through this is the condition of the visitor center. The visitor center is one of the only places on the island that is meant to be seen by outsiders, but it isn't being taken care of. A lot of the quote private parts of the island are in staggering disrepair. They're clearly unsanitary, clearly terrible places for people to be living in, but not the visitor center. The visitor center isn't good, but rather merely cleaner. It's not nice like the entryway, the mansion, or parts of the medical facility. It's just unkempt. It's unclean. It's more disorganized than in disrepair. The paint is peeling, the floor is dusty and dirty, the windows are smudged and you can barely see through them. And that says something very different. It says the asylum doesn't need to take care of this place. Nobody comes here anymore. Either because of Arkham's reputation, because the place is so dangerous, or because people just give up on anybody who gets sent to Arkham. Any way around, it's a pretty sad sight. Now I want to talk about the penitentiary and how it shows the difference between what's shown on the outside and what's clearly terrible on the inside. It obviously does. Everyone who's played knows that, but I want to hone in on a couple of things. The worst of the unnamed patients are just jammed into either little boxes or into these glass rooms that clearly aren't going to do anybody any good. They're clearly very secure in there. It's one of the most secure places on the island, actually, specifically because all of the locks actually properly work. The floor is electrified so that no one can enter or leave. It's almost an intensive isolation setting. But even here, that's very strange. One of the most consistent things that you can see throughout the island is the juxtaposition between the falling apart old Arkham and the new technology that seems to almost be jammed in there, trying to patch the place as it falls apart. I could very easily imagine that in this universe, Bruce Wayne donates tons of money to Arkham Asylum over the years, trying to help him get better security, trying to get the place to be better so that the people that he has to fight as Batman actually have a chance to get better. This is something that was a very big part of his characterization in Batman the Animated Series, which the game is very well known for taking a lot of inspiration from. But here, it's like that money was taken, that technology was taken, it was just sort of jammed in there without much thought or consideration for how to make it effective. In fact, I believe with the medical building, the front door has this security door or electric grid that keeps you from coming in through the front door, but you can walk upstairs, you can just break right through the brickwork of the upper building and get in that way. There are several other places like this where there's an impenetrable door or something you don't get to open the entire game through, but you take a few steps aside and there's a normal old door there that you can just open and walk through. And even if it was locked, someone like Batman would easily be able to break through it or pick the lock. The juxtaposition is even worse in the penitentiary, where we have this electrified floor, these fancy remote controlled locked cells inside of an old steel building that has steel girders holding up the ceiling, and they just strap pillows onto these girders. The high-tech solution here, patch job over here. It says a lot about how inconsistently taken care of this place is. One of the other just sad things I see in the penitentiary is that Harvey Dent has a cell here. Now, some of the other supervillains that have their cells in this building makes sense. Mr. Freeze has to have a special cell, and it needs to be kept away from others because he is very smart and dangerous. Clayface is insanely dangerous and needs a specialized cell that should be kept in one of the most secure places in the facility. Calendar Man is not as dangerous, but is clearly incredibly insane, and you're not really going to be able to do much with him. But Harvey Dent? You would think that if Warden Sharp wants to make a big deal about curing somebody, it wouldn't be someone as obviously insane and dangerous as the Joker. It'd be Harvey Dent, the man who used to be beloved by the city. Then again, if he cured Dent, Harvey would probably get Arkham shut down, and any idea of someone as dirty as Warden Sharp gaining the mayor's position would end pretty fast. I don't know if that was the intended implication, but I do think it might have actually been a thought process there. Also, as an aside to that, if, like in the animated series, Bruce Wayne frequently comes to visit Harvey Dent, he probably doesn't do it in the visitor center. He probably does it in the Arkham Mansion. Sharp probably sets aside some space there, the nicest place on the island, for them to talk. Unlike in the animated series, Bruce Wayne doesn't appear to actually be involved in the asylum's running. In the series, at least in later seasons, we actually do see an episode where Bruce is actually on a board reviewing the head security official. I'm not going to go fully into the story, but clearly he isn't involved here the same way. Probably all he's able to do is make donations, try and fund more security, more technology, and just didn't do any good. So, a few other little things. I think about the people who we find that have survived the night. I think a lot of people know that Cash and a couple of people with him were still alive. You can still find them in the mansion easily enough. However, if you go downstairs to the bottom floor of the library, you can find the two people that you saved back when you first came through there, and they're still alive. None of them have any comments, though. Cash, strangely, has some remarks for after you beat Ivy, but doesn't have any remarks that acknowledge that you beat the game if you visit him afterwards. You can also find a small group of doctors in the medical facility that have barricaded themselves in one of the rooms that you saved them in earlier. I also found one still living guard in the intensive treatment building, in the room where you fight the first Titan henchman. When I found him, my first thought was, oh, wait, no, he's dead. But actually, when I examined him, I found that he's unconscious. I kind of imagine that he probably stayed there awake through the whole night, and then once news came in that Joker had been captured, probably just sat down right there and went to sleep, because they probably needed it. Speaking of staff, I also noticed that, unfortunately, you can find a staff area very early in the game that you walk through, and it's in bad shape. It's not as terrible, but it's like the visitor center. It's not being kept up with, it's not being kept clean, and even if some of these lights went out during the breakout, it's still pretty bad lighting for what I assume is the room that the guards change in. Another little thing is, so far, at least in this playthrough, and from what I recall, only one of the Riddler trophies is actually a trap. Probably not, maybe not fully intended, not a death trap like you would see in the later games, but still something that could get you hurt and killed if you screwed up. And as a final observation, we have this little section of the cliffside in Arkham Asylum. It's, I think, the only point in the series that we fully leave civilization, as in, like, no immediate signs of technology. I don't think it's quite the right words, but there just isn't another moment like this in the rest of the series, to my knowledge. And I thought that was worth sharing. Those are my observations. Thank you for listening. So, this has been my second video essay. I've been working on this since I finished playing through Arkham Asylum almost a month ago. It has gone considerably slower than I originally thought, partially because I wanted to do more with this than I had with the previous video, despite it not being long. I seriously underestimated how much time and effort I would end up having to put into this, which has slowed down not only this and my actual gameplay videos, but also my game making project. Clearly, I can't just do this at the same time as those. I need to actually do only one or the other, and for next while, I'm going to be focusing on getting my next game update out. But I will hopefully do more stuff like this over other games that I play in the future, or maybe go back and talk like this over games I've already played. Meantime, I need to pick what I'm going to be playing next, but I would love to hear feedback of any sort about this. I hope that I'm getting better. I know I still have room for improvement, but I hope that what I have here is enjoyable, that this was a couple of new things that you hadn't heard before. And as always, thank you for listening.